This semester, I embarked on a journey that not only taught me about aspects of myself, but also aspects about the lives of the women throughout the world. I delved into the stories of women from the countries of Mexico, Liberia, Iran, India, and Korea. Through these stories, I was submerged in the cultures they kept alive, the beliefs they fought for, and the strife they endured for simply being a woman. While preparing for this journey, I read an article on the concept of listening, which requires being open-minded and silencing my preconceived notions of other cultures. This skill allowed me to become open to the difference between feminism and womanism, and it allowed me to understand the effects of Orientalism on both the Asian culture as a whole and the women there as well. And it also allowed me to embrace and listen to the different cultures in my travels without forcing my westernized views on them, enabling me to understand the various lives of the women of the world. With my luggage packed, as I tucked in the skill of listening to engage in these countries and texts, I boarded my flight of discovery and started my voyage. I first explored the country of Mexico through the book Like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel. I listened to the culture of cooking and how Tita kept her Mexican culture alive by cooking the recipes from her ancestors and in turn passing them down to those around her. Yet I saw an individualistic characteristic in Tita, since she recognized harmful aspects of her mother's culture, such as never being able to marry, that negatively impacted her life. So she decided to not follow these traditions and instead pave her own path. The descriptions of magical realism, which is fiction that integrates elements of fantasy into otherwise realistic settings, and the text brought the themes of passion and love to light. Since magical realism was portrayed in Tita conveying her emotions through the food she cooked, I continued to see food as a central theme. While embracing the culture of food, I learned about my Nicaraguan culture in a new way. My whole life has been surrounded by food through my parents and my abuelita, and though I knew of the significance of cooking with my family, I had a greater desire to learn these recipes and pass them down so that our family's Nicaraguan culture stays alive in our future generations. Packing this concept of culture in my luggage for future examinations of literature, I grabbed my next book, Mighty Be Our Powers, by Lema Bowie, and arrived in Liberia. Immediately, I was surrounded by a country plagued by war. And though this war posed disastrous effects for everyone, the ones that were negatively impacted by not only the war, but also the men in the war, were the women, since many of them experienced the effects of gender-based violence and violence against women and girls. But I was astonished by the perseverance of Lema and women like her, since they did not let their life of being abused prevent them from fighting for what they believed in, which was ending the war. I saw the direct applications of the ethics of care, which is using communication as the appropriate mode for conflict resolution. Lema used the communication to express to Charles Taylor and other war leaders that the war must end, and these women succeeded. These aspects taught me to look for the forces of women in times of war, for they are the leaders who achieve peace that few people mention. Remembering these discoveries, I traveled further east and landed in Iran by reading Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. Here I entered another time period of war, the Iranian Revolution, told in the perspective of a child's eyes. My time here taught me to explore Iran and the war from its people's point of view instead of a westernized view. I learned about the aspect of the veil and how it relates to womanism. I saw the necessity of using my listening skills to understand the definition of womanism, which is having or expressing a belief in or respect for women and their talents and abilities beyond the boundaries of race and class. I applied this to discovering the veil and why Iranian women wear it. I learned that the veil is their culture, and despite that some westernized views may believe it to be oppressive, these Iranian women are the only ones that can make this judgment. Therefore, I listened to Marjan's view of the veil and her individualism in both preserving and criticizing certain aspects of her culture. I discovered more about myself in my stay in this country. I learned that I am more of a womanist instead of simply a feminist, since womanism incorporates all the women and their cultures throughout the world. Before arriving at my next country, I made a pit stop in Lebanon through reading the short story Grooming Rana by Reem Rashash Shaban. In this story, I continue to note the individualism in women breaking away from what they believe to be a harmful effect that a culture can have on them. Rana did not wish to follow her mother's tradition in arranging her marriage with a man, for she desired to choose who she wanted to marry. Once again, I reached into my belongings to apply womanism to this story, for I knew that I could not judge this cultural tradition from my westernized views, but instead I listened to how Rana viewed this tradition and supported her individualism. Keeping the aspect of womanism easily accessible in my travel gear, I flew to India by dissecting the book The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. In this period, I discovered the results of British imperialism in India. The British tried to start changing the foundations of India, which included trying to convert the Hinduism religion to Christianity, and even removing the caste system. And I saw conflicting aspects of this, with the Kochima family being Syrian Christian, but still in a sense upholding the caste system. I discovered the individualism of the woman in these times, with Amu breaking away from the love laws to be with Velutha. And I noticed the upholding of cultures with the practice of the Kathakali, which is a 300-year-old dance that tells the history of the Hindu epics culture. Since many of them performed for Western colonizers or tourists, I saw that the effects of Orientalism, coined by Edward Said, which involves the West patronizing representations of the East, since many Westerners might interpret the dance to be exotic or unfamiliar. The book also portrayed this by describing Margaret's interpretations of the Indian culture as strange from her British customs. My sojourn in this country imparted on me the knowledge of embracing and appreciating various cultural traditions and not falling prey to westernized Orientalism. For women of all countries and cultures should practice support for their fellow global women's cultures as well. As my journey began to near an end, I retained the knowledge I gathered from my stays in the previous countries to finally land in the country of South Korea in reading the book Comfort Woman by Nora Akshakalar. Arriving in the period of World War II, I saw another instance of violence against women and girls in times of war. For the story revolved around a comfort woman, Sun Hyo. I was horrified how the soldiers sexually abused women and young girls under the guise of labeling them comfort women. I saw that the abuse they endured affected their mental well-being, and in turn the effects of these mental illnesses on these women's children, particularly with Sun Hyo and Becca. At the same time, I saw the aspect of women upholding their cultures and traditions, with Sun Hyo worshipping the spirits and attempting to pass her traditions, such as preparing certain foods with Becca, so that she can preserve her memory. In this aspect, I noticed the individualism in Becca, as she breaks away from the tradition of desiring to have children and be a mother, and instead focusing on her career. Yet although she distanced herself from these traditions, she accepted the culture her mother cherished after her mother's death. Consequently, my journey in South Korea enlightened me on the dangerous effects of war on women caused by men. Yet at the same time, I learned how resilient women are in overcoming their struggles and caring for their children. After landing back home, just in time for finals, I began to unpack all the discoveries I made throughout my global travels. And in doing this, I discovered various connections among the women in the books set in these various countries. I saw a connection in the negative effects that war has on women, particularly in causing them violence, not from the battles themselves, but from the men who are both soldiers and husbands. This arose in the countries of Liberia in Mighty Be Our Powers and South Korea in Comfort Woman. Still, I also saw the determination and how these women overcame their struggles of abuse and did not let that prevent them from living their lives. In all the countries I visited, I saw a concurring theme in women preserving their culture for future generations. from the food they prepared to the traditions they kept. Yet at the same time, I also saw a sense of individualism that these women upheld in a breaking away from some harmful aspects of their culture when necessary to put themselves and their well-being first, whether it be Tita upholding traditional recipes while also expressing her sexuality, or young Marjan choosing her own ideals to follow instead of following those around her. Overall, I listened. I listened to these women's stories, their traditions, their cultures, and their lives. I also have learned valuable skills in this journey, and I'm excited to apply these skills to my next journey in discovering the lives of the women of the world.